This is the full case of the mysterious 4chan whistleblower. Now, this is a man who worked as a crash retrieval specialist for the government for several years up until 2021. And he has intimate knowledge of what the U.S. currently knows about the UFO phenomenon. He says we should be paying more attention to the oceans.
What we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right, at will.
It was freaking huge. It was going really slow. It had these big lights in it. It didn't make a sound.
And as I'm pulling up, it's kind of starting to cross my nose, and it starts to accelerate, and within about less than a second, as I start to pull nose onto it and it crosses right in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone.
Not just radar, but visual sighting, infrared sensors, telescopic evidence. Now we have multiple sightings by multiple modes, and so the burden of proof has shifted.
I personally, and I know they feel the same way, it doesn't matter to me whether you believe me or not. It doesn't. It only matters to you. Because we know what we saw. We know what we have. You need to see that. You need to understand that. That's it.
Okay, welcome to 55 Folks. We were recently voted the most humble, up-and-coming podcast on YouTube.
We choose to go to the moon. Not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Do it live. I can all write it and do it live. Thing sucks.
So obviously the UFO space is quite wild. There's just tons of stories and claims swirling around, tons of disinformation just pumped out there. A few grifters and a few people who maybe embellish things, but that's everywhere you go. I think there's plenty of evidence out there if you know where to look. If you're kind of new to the topic, I would just look at these cases and ignore a lot of the other stuff. But I guess we're kind of ignoring our own advice here, because today we are not sticking with these cases. We are venturing off into some wild speculation. So this 4chan whistleblower is a fellow who he did like a question and answer session. This was back in 2023, where he detailed his past work in a covert government program and kind of laid out his knowledge of the UFO phenomenon. So make what you will of this, but I think it stands out to a lot of people because of like how detailed he gets and how quickly he responds to questions with weirdly specific detail. But it's a fun and compelling read. And I put the link to like the actual archived thread in the description here if you just want to go read it instead of listening to us speculate about it. And yeah, there's footage. If you're curious, I just took my bike down to the mighty Mississippi River this past weekend and rode along a stretch of it. At the end of this road, there are a bunch of huge riverfront mansions, which was pretty cool. So I thought that might be a little more interesting than just the screen being on this lip sync of our voices the whole time. But anyways, yeah, let's get into this question and answer. I'll read off the question that someone asked this guy and then what he responded with. And later on, he does say something that kind of caught my attention and might shed some insight into the legitimacy of all this. And we'll kind of go over how we both feel about this overall at the end. So his first post said, I have intimate knowledge of what the U.S. currently knows about UFOs minus the last 2 years. He says UFOs are primarily unmanned drones. They are built to spec each time they are deployed, and they're created by a mobile construction facility in the Atlantic Ocean. And this facility destroys anything that comes close to it, and it will disappear for days if it's approached aggressively. And the U.S. believes the facility has been active on Earth for at least 100 years or much longer. He says, fire away on questions. I'll answer what I can. You won't be disappointed. Do they know who or what is creating these craft? He says, yes, as mentioned earlier, the Mobile Construction Unit is responsible for their deployment and construction. Any potential that they are made by a higher branch of U.S. government? He says, absolutely not. What allows them to fly so fast? What technology? he says gravity manipulation and the materials they are constructed from, which he doesn't list here. He might get into that later. This one, someone must have asked what the construction unit is driven, or what operates it. He says, we think the construction unit is driven by artificial intelligence. The response time to threats is almost instant and usually very calculated and well thought out. So I guess that means like not necessarily aliens living in this thing. He's saying it's just some sort of unit that's programmed for whatever tasks of deploying UFOs for different purposes and observation or whatever its ultimate goal is. I don't know that he's saying there aren't some beings in this unit, though. He says you should all pay attention to this. The majority of UFOs, as I mentioned previously, are built to spec and purpose. This is why there are always different sizes. The contents and equipment usually mimic the intended purpose too. So basically saying they're different for the most part, built to some specific use or job, whatever the mission goal, I guess. It's just built to serve that specific purpose. It's not like they have a fleet of standard ones that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know how to talk about it really.
What kind of goals does it get into what kind of goals they have?
I think, yeah, more generally, there's some questions that get into that. I'm not sure what page that'll be on. Do the UAPs return back to the manufacturing unit? He says, yes, some come in and leave the planet, but very rarely. Usually the same number that comes in goes out unless special circumstances arise. It feels more like a carrier, but with construction capability. So he says rarely there's ones actually coming from space or leaving the planet, but most of the activity is just to and from this ocean facility. What are the purposes of the UAP's surveillance of humans is the question. He says, the U.S. believes they are not here to harm us. They only seem interested in us once they realize we are destroying things around us, including each other. One of the officials in charge said something that stuck with me. He said they act like keepers of a zoo, uninterested in the daily life of wildlife until there's a problem. So it's a little spooky. They're just monitoring us or something.
Yeah.
To some unknown end. Another question, has any form of intelligible communication been established with whatever is running this thing or producing these UFOs? He says yes. It also depends on your viewpoint. They mostly want very little to do with us until we start to talk about war and nuclear options. It's one of the reasons why you see them so often at critical events. So there he's referring to a lot of the sightings have been in regard, like over military bases, and I think specifically bases that have some sort of nuclear activity.
Weird.
This guy asks, can I approach that facility without being attacked? He says, LOL. The last unit we saw approach the facility didn't even have time to communicate they were being attacked before it was over. So, yeah, just sucked underwater. Well, yeah, if it was an airplane unit or a boat or submarine, I don't know.
I guess
just get recycled into the next UFO manufacturer. This guy asks, are they friends? He says, they cut their losses when crashes are recovered. Same with personnel. It must have been a different question. But he says zookeepers aren't friends with the animals, which I guess is true, but most zookeepers kind of like the animals, I would think.
Yeah.
If you're working at this, just an analogy, I guess.
They also feed and water the shelter them.
Yeah.
I don't know where the analogy ends.
Yeah, I'm not being fed by an alien.
That you know of.
Unless we're alien food.
Have you ever talked to a local farmer? Seen what's behind the eye?
Dig into it a little more. Question, do you know if the entities behind the UFOs are native to the Earth? Like, are they an older civilization, breakaway civilization, or a civilization of humans that escaped a previous cycle of cataclysm due to their advanced tech? That sounds kind of up Graham Hancock's alley.
Should have him on.
Ancient civilization. He could speculate wildly on this.
What do we do to get him on?
I don't know. we could somehow forge our viewership numbers. And maybe he won't catch it, like make a fake website. You'd have to seem like he's interested with anyone with reach, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because that helps him. So I would say that'd be the way to do it. Just a little forgery.
A little forgery real quick.
Probably have to brush up our communication skills, or else it'll be obvious right away that we're not, we don't have the viewership we claim to have. But the answer to that, what these entities are, he says, he has limited expertise since my role is more craft/analysis. The U.S. believes they are foreign to our world. A previous cataclysm could make sense. They also show up in times of strife, such as natural events. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Natural disasters or what? Okay. Question, have you tried sending in a raft of hippies? The AI may not recognize them as a threat. It's kind of a
We
jokester
come in peace,
question.
man.
It says, based on previous disappearances and acts of hostility, we believe the construction facility or carrier has learned what is and isn't hostile. Usually it will just move away or stay deep under the water. It doesn't fire on civilian boats, for example. Exceptions apply. I don't know what he's wording here. Exceptions apply. We have some word wrong there. Anyways, I guess in exception, we have seen one or two go missing, usually after sharp turns. So if you're a civilian boat, you're just going where you're going. Apparently it can say, okay, they're not a threat. They're just passing by. But if you have to change direction, then it doesn't know what you're doing. Just take you out because you're a possible threat.
So they just disappear or what? Is that
apparently
what
he never gets into like what specifically happens to things that approach it. I don't know if it just like sinks you or like actually
just vaporize
atomizes you, probably. Yeah, something you can't imagine. How about the destination of the space orbs? So the few that do actually leave the planet. Is Jupiter a potential destination? I believe they are keeping a massive orb inside of the gas giant, though I have no evidence but many dreams of it. That's the question.
Oh, okay. I thought that was
No, that's not the guy. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be very convincing if that was our whistleblower guy. Gets into dreams of Jupiter. This guy says, no idea. If it is a project, I haven't seen it. No orbs out of the construction facility, just UFOs. Okay, I know what that means. So what units have been lost approaching this machine? Why have they not sent a Sea Wolf, which I think is a submarine, to investigate? He says, everything you can think of, really. At one point, nuclear missiles were being toyed with again, and we deployed fighters and a sub with serious intent. Everything except the sub was lost. So he doesn't mention a year there, but he says the U.S. was messing with missiles a little too much, and the unit started to deploy more UFOs, I think. You can kind of infer. They tried to go investigate the unit, and everything but the sub was lost. How have they come to the conclusion the UAP being released are ET? If they don't know what the UAP are to begin with, or if there's nothing inside of them, it's a pretty big jump to go right to. And he says they crash sometimes, parts fail, and gravity engines near the surface of the planet can be like crossing an intersection. We recover these and sometimes find passengers. We mostly see drones now. Back in the earlier days, we saw a lot more piloted craft, he says. So that kind of goes with what that David Grush saying, how we have, that guy, he went on Rogan probably about a year and a half ago. He testified in front of Congress and stuff as like a whistleblower on some of these programs and what the government has evidence of. His argument was that higher-ups had keyed him in on everything they know and stuff. It wasn't experiences he had had or anything like that. Yeah, I don't really know what to make of those types of guys either. It seems like some kind of planned. It doesn't seem like he just chose to be a whistleblower. There's some kind of agenda with what he's saying. Like whether
like a
it's
government agenda, or you think he has a personal agenda?
No, not personal. I wouldn't. No.
Oh, like it's something different to throw you off the
Not
scent of.
Yeah, not like he's making it up to get personally famous. But like, yeah, I would think like some or most of it's true, but there's also things like designed to throw people off of certain, just mass confusion slash,
Yeah.
I don't know. Or it's just a kind of a planned soft disclosure where they just want to kind of get people used to talking about this stuff
Yeah.
gradually. So it's not just like,
Not just
whatever.
a shock.
Yeah. Anyways.
Well,
but
you
this
always figure if when the government starts talking about it, there's the first hearing of it.
yeah.
It's not like they
No.
find it Tuesday and then we found this.
Yeah.
And it's your right to know.
Yeah.
It's like this is something they found in the 40s, and 80 years later
Here's our weekly recap of everything we know.
Yeah, right.
Citizens. Yeah. Yeah, not quite. But the one thing that stood out about this, where he says, we mostly see drones now, but back in the earlier days, we saw more piloted. That doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know what the reason for that would be, I guess. 'Cause it seems like if it's some ancient or whatever, super advanced civilization, like seems like whatever they're doing, like they wouldn't really be advancing or, changing their technology. Like why would more have been piloted and now it's something different? It's
Yeah.
like our drone technology is rapidly advancing, but that's because it's new.
In the infancy.
It's like, yeah, I don't know.
Once you have it figured out to get to the level that it's been at, yeah, you wouldn't. I see what you're saying. Like over
I
the
don't
course
know.
of 40 years, you wouldn't all of a sudden get to a place where, okay, well now we can have unmanned crafts. Like we have
Yeah.
a whole station that can build them underwater and destroy anything that comes near it. But then over the course of however many years, like, well, we've got to the ability where we don't need to have somebody flying this thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've always thought it made more sense that things like that were drones, little aliens in them. Sort of.
Yeah, little green guy, stick and rudder.
I don't know. I mean, this guy does claim that there have been crashes with beings in them, whether they're AI beings or what they are. I don't know if he gets into that. This question: why do you not know anything about the last 2 years? Just curious. He says, moved on from the project because of new management that didn't trust older proven methods. So management running
Tale
the
as
place,
old as time.
running the place like they're flipping a house. Got kicked out. So question. This is a question about him saying the last unit that was attacked and couldn't communicate before it was over for him. Any details on that attack? He says, normal approach details, pilot responsive and actively talking. The feed cuts out, pilot still talking, suddenly nothing. Poor guy likely had no idea it was likely a suicide mission. Based on what we've seen, the construction facility has far superior weapons than the UFOs do. This weapon destroys the matter it hits entirely. Okay, that's how it works. Just vaporizes, like you said, atomizes it. It also messes up any electronics in the vicinity. I don't know. I guess it would make sense how it could stay hidden, but that's also a convenient way to explain why we can't see it or anything. It goes both ways. The contents question is, the contents and equipment usually mimic the intended purpose too, like the equipment share a pattern specific to its purpose. He says, yes, usually when we find a thinner model, for example, it would have no pilot and a lot of sensory hardware. My favorite is finding one that is fitted for research. If we are lucky, we find things we have never seen before. Before I left, we were looking at what we thought was a lab of some. So I don't know, maybe he gets into this later, but he says his job is like the crash retrieval. He's like the second stage. Yeah.
What I don't really understand about that is if they have all that ability and technology, why don't they have some sort of, like when it does crash, well, number one, I would feel like they should be crash proof, but number two, I feel like if it did crash, then it should have self-destruct button or something.
Yeah.
If they didn't want, unless they want some to crash from time to time.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. At one point he says that crashes, they just cut their losses. They're just like, whatever, I guess. They don't send another UFO to try to retrieve it or, anything like that, he says.
Yeah.
So, question, I've had 2 orange orbs approach me within 100 feet one night glowing translucent, but rather dim, like the setting sun seen through smog. They're flying in 45-degree formation, about 50 miles per hour. And he says, research and science vessels sometimes have mobile light-producing cameras, in quotes, used for multiple purposes, from scouting to keeping threats contained or at bay. These are shaped like hammers, and when operated are extremely bright. Red lights are a sign of hostility or caution to deploy weapons. Orange lights are usually for spotting minerals or living things. So a lot of the videos recently have been orange orbs. I don't know if you've seen those. It's like with it's all those sightings that kind of started and they're all over now. It seems a lot of them are like these orange orbs, and they also have like the bigger drones with the kind of more traditional air flashing lights and stuff. The drones look slightly more like something, but in a lot of the videos they're like interacting lights. I guess he would say the orange is research or science, but red is hostility.
It's good to know.
Stay away from a red light. There's some video I should try to find.
Don't tell that to the biohackers out there.
This guy says, as soon as I blinked my flashlight at them, this is the guy asking the question, they accelerated to several thousand knots and disappeared over the horizon. Searched YouTube and found several videos of the same objects, mostly near San Diego. He says, I'm not surprised. The range on those is quite large. The UFO is likely somewhere above you, quite high up. I guess that's the end of that. Question, are aliens human or humanoid? He says humanoid, very humanoid. So later on he says they're kind of similar to what, just like this small bodies, big eyes, kind of how they're depicted quite often. I think they're depicted that way because that's the common depiction in whatever sighting claims or interaction claims. So he basically confirms that. He doesn't go with some other, that there's some six-legged creature with whatever. It says there's the small humanoid type. Question, will there be disclosure anytime soon? He says the Air Force is extremely frustrated with the lack of progress on their end. We felt similar, but are unable to share details with them. So he's cut off from the airport. He's some advanced program he claims he works for, well beyond what the Air Force knows. So I'd assume this was a sort of AI design that seems to be advanced, yet already prepared for the get-go. He says, basically when designed to, let's say, be a miner, you will usually see hardware dedicated to resource collection on the vessel. If the vessel is something scientific, you may encounter things like tools and, as previously mentioned, something akin to a lab. We thought of it more as a, quote, I need to go hiking. So the construction facility builds you a car, UFO, and packs it full of hiking supplies and even adjusts the shape to fit what was packed. So the AI creates these very specific to their purpose. Do you think there are fewer piloted crafts because the population of the facility, if any, is declining? He says, no, the common consensus is that they are just being careful. I've heard recovery of living pilots usually doesn't go well for either of us. We suspect they piloted a lot of initial craft due to early complications. We also saw more crashes. Early complications, that doesn't seem to make sense. Seems.
Well, if they've been there for thousands of years.
Well, yeah, on the one hand, he said 100 years or possibly more, but that seems a little too convenient unless they just showed up because we set off some sort of advanced civilization signal. They detected something, but the more plausible seems like something that's always been here or something. Any bodies recovered show any ranges of aging we can recognize. I wonder if most of the inhabitants are either old or dead at this point, though younger bodies would disprove that, I suppose. It says, no idea about age, not my specialty, and asking about it would have been a net negative, especially now. Previous higher-ups were getting better about being open with information since discovery happened quicker. Mentions the higher-ups a lot. What do the passengers look like? Are they biological and or android? Bio. So not robots, they're at least biological or biologically engineered. Do you know anything about people such as Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo, or whatever? Are these people in the know, or LARPers or controlled misinformation, etc. He says, no idea. One name sticks out you didn't mention. Mentioning Bob Lazar by name would likely have you taken out back and put down like a dog. Do the math. Do the math on why, which I wasn't sure what math to do on, on why there. It seems like he's saying Lazar is telling the truth. And that's one thing that makes me more skeptical of this guy, because I don't really believe or trust Bob Lazar at all. I think there's definitely a lot going on with the phenomena overall, but I don't trust Bob Lazar's story. So anyone that confirms or backs up him is kind of a red flag to me.
Were you the one who sent me the body language expert?
Oh, yeah.
Breaking down Lazar's?
Well, it's the panel of 4 of them, and they had good points. Like literally every time Rogan asked a specific on physics or why something, he would always give, some excuse and would go off topic, kind of like a politician, would just kind of answer it. But then at the end, you realize he never answered the specific question. And looking down a lot. Because, you just watch the interview like that and whatever, he talks the whole time and it all seems interesting. It doesn't seem like he's lying, but when you go analyze it and realize really answered specifics, that's part of it.
Do you think he might have been the person doing this thread? Just a long, elaborate plan to give himself some credibility.
Yeah, I don't know if that theory's out there. It could be. Because he does, he gets into Lazar a little bit later with the element 115. Lazar claimed propels these things, and he had actually took some of the element, Lazar said.
Yeah. I don't really understand. I mean, because that whole thing it's just the next step in the periodic table, right? So. Yeah.
I guess I don't know enough.
I don't know. I mean, because he said it before it existed, then they found it.
Yeah, but it's just the next
step. You can kind of do the math. From what I understand about it, you could say, well, there could be an element, whatever, 117.
Yeah.
And just would have 117 electrons and 117 protons or whatever it is. It's been a while, but I don't know. It seemed like when I listened to it anyways, I thought, well, you could predict the existence of that based on the rest of the table if you just keep going.
Yeah,
just haven't found it.
It's like, he talked about it before we found it, but it's not like it wasn't like some crazy idea that.
Yeah, I could be way off, but that's what I kind of remember thinking.
Out of everything ever found regarding UFOs in general, what is your personal favorite? He says, a new engine was deployed with a very large model that I'd never seen before. We usually see 3 to 5 gravity-producing engines. This one had 7. Favorite object or find? Probably the lab, since we never fully understood how it worked before it was destroyed. This question...
Gravity-producing engine, huh?
Yeah, that seems the consensus on how they operate, are the ones that change direction and velocity instantaneously and stuff. Type of gravity manipulation, not rocket propulsion, obviously. If something... If it's actually a physical object moving like that. Question, this makes me wonder whether a meaningful distinction between scientific study and amusement still exists for them, if it ever did. He says, this was before my time, but they talked about a bus-type UFO that had more occupants than hardware. Most of the intended purpose appeared to be for physical viewing. I wondered if they ever just wanted to look at the animals. So it's kind of taking a tour.
Tourist.
Oh, look at that city.
Holy cow. That's
this
hilarious.
farmer, let's fly by him. He won't tell anyone. No one will believe him.
Oh, that's funny.
So, a bus UFO. There is one of the most, I don't know what you'd call it, noteworthy accounts was the Phoenix Lights. That was like a giant.
No.
People estimate it was like, some people say like a mile wide, but several hundred yards from all the eyewitness accounts. Just this giant UFO that just slowly moved over the city. And that one's interesting because all the eyewitness accounts are like right after dark. I forget what month it was. I think it was like 6 or 7 p.m. So probably a winter month, I guess. Of this object coming over. It's like a V type shape, had 5 lights in a V formation. It was just massive, silent, slow moving, whatever. Thousands of eyewitnesses in Phoenix reported it. And then like at 9 or 10 p.m., local, I don't know what air base that is, but they dropped flares in a V formation over the mountain range. So then everyone who had kind of heard about this initial one then saw that and was like, oh, it's back or whatever. And there's tons of pictures of those flares. And that often gets like misinterpreted as this was the UFO. And
flares.
like, no, that's just flares. But that's seemingly why they dropped them, just to create mass confusion. Yeah, that'd be a long incident to look into on its own. Question, this is a strangely recurrent theme. At a minimum, they have psychotronic devices of some sort. I don't know what he's referencing there, so I guess this is just like a thread someone pulled out all this guy's answers, so we're missing some of the things other people say. He says, this reminded me of something my first year. It doesn't say what year was his first year. UFO crashes. They remove the bodies well before my team arrives. We start to look, and the craft is unpowered at first. A few minutes later, the craft powers on and starts to close up. We radio out and get a response from the unit, removing one of the occupants that they are working on it. Ship powers off, and the other team asks if we are good to go. No mention of how access was possible. I suspect the pilot may have interfaced with the ship by remote or psionic, speculating. Not like a cockpit with controls, they just kind of control it with their mind, or it's remote operated. They have lots of tools they use produce light, if this is still about the orb. The shell you may have seen was just the light around the device I call the hammer. I don't know what he means by the hammer. He says that's kind of what the camera device is for their observation. If it's just like a construction hammer, does that just refer to a thing with just, I don't know, like a hammer and a shark? What do you call that, a hammer? Just like 2 ends and a pole between them. Question, are there more than one construction facility? You mentioned the Bermuda Triangle. However, there are a lot of USOs off of the West Coast and the Americas as well. He says, I suspect there may be, since we only watch the Atlantic Ocean, and the UFOs we track normally don't stray far from home base. Asking about it would have been a bad move, which that doesn't seem, I don't know. I feel like if you were in the position this guy claims to be, like, you'd know, if you know so much about this one, you would know that there are more. It seems like
I don't know why asking about it is a bad move.
Yeah, that too. He's claiming there's all this compartmentalized secrecy so that no one knows too much.
No one really knows the whole deal.
Is what he's saying the structure is. But yeah, at some points he like kind of concedes some of these things, like after someone else brings it up, like, oh yeah, that could be, but so I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't know, but it also seems like he probably would have known, just to me. Question, I read somewhere some UFO navigation systems require an ET whose own personal wavelength has been specifically tuned to the neural network of the craft. It'd be interesting to see where he read that or reading it. He says, this tracks somewhat for me. When we look at the craft, we usually have to force certain things to work. 2 teams come behind mine, so that could be dedicated to understanding of the craft. Can you tell us what the beings look like physically? Usual gray type or big ears? He says, imagine the typical grays you see on TV. Probably just means depictions in TV and movies and stuff. I've seen 2 corpses, so maybe there are different species, but I've never laid eyes on. Anything about their culture, name, etc.? He says, rumors mostly. They almost never want anything to do with us. Mentions of destruction or warfare apparently change their attitude pretty quickly. So they're not, they're kind of researching us and keeping each other. It's kind of a theme. Which,
any theories as to why that would be? I mean, why would you?
Well,
if you weren't interested, why would you care?
Yeah, we can get into some theories after. I think probably my top theory is that it's like us from the future. I don't think it's like aliens. I don't think it's like aliens from another planet based on my extensive research. So there's one guy who kind of talks about that theory some, Michael Masters. That just seems to make, it's some mix of that or some psychic phenomenon type thing. But that would make sense to me if it's like us, because they're kind of like what you could imagine a human would evolve into.
Yeah.
Based on not needing, like frail. They say they're just, no muscle or anything, just tiny, big heads, focused, whatever. They use their brains, big eyes, no ear. I don't know.
Well, maybe I don't understand time travel or whatever, I guess, good enough, but I don't know why they would need to, if they were already existed in the future, why would they need to come back and prevent us from total destruction? Because if they were there, then the total destruction wouldn't have happened.
Oh, that's a good point. Be multiple, what is time when you think about it? Be multiple timelines going on. Yeah, I haven't got that far.
Also,
I'll crack that
if it was
next.
me and I was like a 3-foot tall, gray, bald alien, I would want to stroll down Maine and,
Hey, everybody.
get the people talking.
Yeah, maybe that would throw off the timeline too much.
Yeah, that could. Well, I guess you can't. Yeah, they say not to, do too much, then you won't.
Yeah, part of the problem now is if you had a close-up HD video, no one's going to believe you anymore.
Yeah, AI.
So either it's why is it always so far away and so blurry? Or if it's too close, that's a fake. So there's really nowhere. Unless like it's something happens at a live event, I guess, or enough people
Super Bowl.
see things in person.
How crazy would that be? Just halftime a UFO lands.
Oh, it's part of the halftime show.
Wow, what a realistic halftime.
I loved that halftime show. It seems so real. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's so far under
This is cool, but can we get to the second half?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we get it. You're here. If you're not going to kill us, just go back to what you're doing.
Yeah, bring Mahomes back out. Let's see if he can
Start booing
win
them.
3 straight. Yeah, boo.
They
Get off
put
the
up
field.
a presentation, the secrets of the universe.
Boo. Get off the
Halftime's
field.
over. Yeah, that's probably what would happen. Maybe not at the Super Bowl because those aren't really
Yeah.
the biggest football fans. But yeah,
Maybe like an AFC or NFC championship game.
yeah, just at a Steelers game. Just
Pittsburgh
boo.
with their towels up.
Yeah, seems like how it would go. Yeah, I'm on page 9 of 35.
No, my.
I tried to cross out the irrelevant ones, but I'm going to try to skim over ones that some of them are kind of redundant. I can also go
I can
back.
just let you go. I can just let you go, and then we'll
all
talk at the end.
Well, yeah, jump in whenever, but I'll breeze through a lot here. So, question, another massive problem is determining which aspects of the encounters are physically real versus psychological, whatever phenomenon. He says, we rely on our biological and technological sensors too much to be able to truly understand the phenomenon, in my opinion, was his response. Yeah, that one we don't have the context for. He says tensions increased after Roswell between U.S. and Soviets. I don't know why. In relation to the nuclear site incursions, airspace violations has also been increasing tensions.
I guess one thing I guess if the sightings increased after we first exploded the nuclear bomb, but I don't get how having those sightings of war,
Like
Or
how they're
how does-
keeping us out of war.
yeah,
Yeah.
by just having sightings.
There's
Unless
one
they're-
case of them, a UFO, it's hard because all you go on is like these retired military testimonies. So this one has multiple people who were there testify of this, that some unknown object, they're running a nuclear warhead test, and they launched it off the coast of California, and a UFO came in and said a light beam or something. It circled it from 4 angles, and after it zapped it from 4 angles, the thing just dropped out of the sky and was disabled. I think that was in the 60s or 70s. So I guess that's one. But yeah, we dropped bombs on Japan and they didn't like intercept those.
Yeah.
So unless that was like what set off some signal in theory
Well, they should have had their signal before that because they were doing
from
the
the
tests.
tests. Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows what
Maybe they just really, yeah, I
I
don't
don't know. Do you believe we are under their control in some way or were sometime in history? It says possibly, but I have no way of knowing. The higher ups I worked for seemed hell-bent on discovering more about them, usually not a quality found among controlled. So he's saying the higher ups, if they were controlled, they wouldn't have been as interested in discovering more about them, I guess. What were the main reasons for the crashes? I'd think random lightning or freak accidents, seeing how advanced they are. He says, you'd be surprised how many mistakes they make, especially the farther back you look. One area they seem to avoid like the plague, we suspect, is due to issues with gravity and flight. Before they figured it out, we collected quite a few mishaps there. They've tried to shoot some down, mostly over nuclear incidents, but failed miserably. Do you see written symbols in the craft? He says, yes, usually marked by doorways and key objects. Written language appears frequently on tools and critical items. Question, it reads like their objective is to observe and preserve. He says, I agree. The idea was pitched that they are waiting for us to mature or perhaps something bigger to arrive, and they don't want us to ruin the planet in the meantime. So that's a separate theory that's out there. It's like some sort of initial scouting mission, doing research, and want the planet to go into a nuclear holocaust before they can whatever. If they're planning to kill us and inhabit it, or what else their goal would, or they're just like a, I don't know, universe cop, just making sure,
no funny business.
like America's a world cop.
Yeah.
Insert themselves everywhere. This could just be a galactic whatever. Fine, just no funny business.
Well, they haven't
That's true. Yeah, we're not.
that we know of.
Yeah, we're not really a peaceful, hands-off foreign policy. Probably not the best analogy. What do you believe to be the reason for the uptick in sightings? Once again, my knowledge was cut off about 2 years ago, if you mean very recently. My guess would be the Russians and U.S. having a little secret dance among themselves. When nuclear anything gets involved, we see large deployments for long periods of time. Strife seems to be the catalyst. So that, I mean, this was all a year and a half ago, but that makes sense. Now there's more nuclear tensions developing. You have all these sightings coming up since November. What is your scariest experience while engaging with the phenomenon? What was your favorite, if any? Doors closing on us, as mentioned above, made me wish I had brown pants. Still fascinated with the lab we found. He mentions this lab a lot. It was damaged by accident, and I never really got much time with it. Are you aware of any foreign alien tech that was successfully reverse engineered? So this one was interesting. He says, yes, we used to laugh at Russian and Chinese designs. We stopped laughing at China when they produced an operational but buggy version of their mining equipment. Still stumps most of our engineers. China also lies out of its ass, but from what we saw, we deemed it operational and working. Countries listed above have flight-capable craft, just not very good ones. I'm not sure how, if he doesn't even know a lot about our own program, how he would know what China had. It seemed weirdly detailed to go into that. What is the energy source? You mentioned Bob, so I think I know already. It says correct-ish. The power source is element 115. The thing no one talks about is that usually they seal it within the craft because it produces its own gravity. Bob Lazar handled element 115, which was already pulled out, which is rare and weird. Protocol now is that only one person is allowed to handle 15. I was forbidden from touching, interacting with it. We still have trouble producing it. So, yeah, I don't know what. Can't really visualize that, so what to make of that. How do UFOs travel in the context of those Tic Tac reports and Bob Lazar's report where they seemingly jump through space-time and light to appear in a new location? This is common when moving at high speeds from a standstill or slow speed initially. Gravity distorts time and the object inside the field can stagger when traveling. Okay, so if someone asks, how are you able to talk about any of this? Didn't you swear to secrecy? He says, yes, liver cancer sucks. So he says I guess you could interpret it as whatever. He's going to die soon, so that's partly. But he's not saying everything, just a little bit. So.
Or it could just be an unrelated statement.
Yeah. Just also that sucks.
Yeah.
No one asked me about that. Wouldn't the government already have their eye on you, considering you could turn out to be a loose end? He says, I'm not going on national TV or radio. I'm on a 4chan board. I'm sure they look at stuff like this, but cancer makes you feel a little different. Also, did you or your coworkers experience strange things outside of work? Okay.
Well, that was the other question I had, and I guess I'll hear his answer, but if they have the ability to just vaporize whatever that comes near, why they allow... Yeah, I don't know. I'll save my thoughts to the end, I guess. Maybe we'll see what he...
This guy says, not in regards to his earlier zookeeper statement, not true. Most zookeepers love their work and love the animals a great deal. He says, I wondered if some of them do like us. They definitely have the ability to destroy us. So that's another instance where he's like, he kind of concedes a bit after someone else says something. It seems like he would be like, no, they treat us as zookeepers. They don't, if he said it earlier, but he just concedes he says he's wondered if some of them do like us. So that one kind of stood out a little bit. Do you think they're playing some role in stopping rogue entities and dangers from space hurting us on a large scale? He says that was another theory. Yes, we think they are more interested in keeping the planet safe from us. Two main suggestions are that we don't spoil the planet before they arrive and take it from us, or they're letting us evolve and grow while preventing devastation. What do you know about this claim? It's in reference to someone who claimed someone saw the construction facility through remote viewing. He says, sadly, not enough to give you a good response. Remote viewing is a very strange thing. It's shown to work at times, but most of the time it doesn't. Or the conclusions have fuzzy connections, as if forced. As for the interdimensional aspect of it, I don't believe there's anything actually interdimensionally happening. It's just our best way to try and grasp or perceive what's going on behind the veil. From what I understand, whatever's behind the phenomenon has the ability to manipulate matter energy in similar ways that we can manipulate information. It also seems to be able to play around with space-time, almost as if we are sitting on or perceiving time that's been homogeneously transformed, while they are free to move about homogeneous space. If they haven't entered the projection space, then they could freely move about our space without interacting with it until they collapse their coordinates into our projective space and normalizing their position with their homogeneous coordinates. I can't quite visualize that, but that's a way. That's why I'm saying you don't hear them, maybe, or they kind of move. Okay, what materials are these UFOs made of? No one's asked that yet. That answer gets complicated quickly. Short answer is an alloy that we cannot reproduce but only repurpose. This alloy is kind of like a film that fits over the frame of the craft. I mentioned they were built to spec. The actual frame itself is heavier and composed of more elements. Both of these alloys have a lot of elements we cannot reproduce. One of the main problems when repurposing these is getting them hot enough. They absorb heat very well, and shaping the metal is a tedious process. Can you walk through the process of identifying the contents of a crashed UFO craft? The first team arrives that deals with occupants and initial discovery. We arrive and meet with an external member of the team who can touch and examine parts we are not allowed to interact with. We never have to cut our way into the UFO. We enter. The first order of business is checking for element 115, then leaving the ship together to send it away. We return and look for any tools and loose objects that can be extracted. We then start to strip any specialized components on board, such as sensory equipment or navigation. We leave, and a third and fourth team arrive, likely to remove the bulk of the craft. So I don't know. I mean, he's talking about this like it's so common, like he's doing these retrievals all the time. But I don't know who's reporting these. Like his agency can detect them somehow and get there, before anyone reports it. They just silence whoever reported it. I mean, there definitely are reports of, like the Roswell one's the most famous and stuff like that, but it's not like you're hearing all these reports of down UFOs all the time, you know. It's more sites, not like reports of crashed ones. So that's where it kind of lost me on that, or I would like to know more on how he would answer that. Are there no other things making UFOs? Yes, UFOs arrive and depart Earth, but very infrequently. Those are usually quite large. The U.S. has been itching to get its hands on a freighter UFO when inbound or outbound, but the chance has never presented itself. Leadership openly stated securing one would result in promotion. The only ones they've captured are the ones this facility produced. They've never captured one that comes from space. That makes sense for the ones like in the military videos, but what about the saucers with multicolored lights? I highly doubt those are drones or military, except for the triangle. Never seen a triangle UFO. Lights are usually on bigger vessels and are sensory in nature. They're also used to spot each other. I don't know where the saucer with multicolored lights report comes from. This guy says, people you wouldn't trust to work on your car engine, claiming they are the go-to guy for examining UFOs. This seems very unlikely. He says, I'm not here to convince anyone. You'll notice yourself coming back to things I've said over time on your own as understanding increases. So to see if what starts to pan out, if we come back to this.
Circle back in 10 years.
Circle back on the right track. He says, pay attention to the Space Force. We were told this would be a long project, disinformation. This would be a long project. Disinformation was one of the key takeaways. New management was hell-bent on going back to secrecy. They thought we were way too open with our operation. What regards they were being open. The zookeeper analogy is strange. Agree with another here that most zookeepers like their jobs and care about the animals. They display high levels of empathy. He says, some of the tools designed for abduction would make you rethink this. A lot of them cause pain or harm. A common tool we find is one that seems to scramble coherent thoughts and make the subject childlike. The best way I can describe its use is like forcing a stroke without actually having one. It makes you delirious, but also childlike for a few hours. So that one's interesting because there is, I forget what country, but there is some report of a UFO encounter where one person or multiple people had this happen to them, which, you know, does that mean this guy's telling the truth, or he just is well versed on everything that's out there and kind of has combined all that into what he's writing here. So it could go either way. Are these beings incapable of empathy? Do they have emotions? I assume they must have learned something from the recovered bodies. He says, never interacted with them, only heard information passed along. They can be upset, though, with previously mentioned topics. They definitely have emotion. Are they from off-world and true ETs? He says the U.S. and leadership were adamant they were off-world. If the Air Force is confused, like you say, why is it the only agency we know of that is not cooperating with Congress and the AARO? I think is some investigation agency into this. He says, you might get a laugh out of this. The Air Force is kept in the dark. We operated above them. A close coworker wondered if even the president knew. Namely Trump, because we both thought he would just tell everyone. So I guess they're speculating he did not know. If he did, he would tell everyone. From what I've seen, I don't know. There's claims like some certain presidents knew more than others. They wouldn't tell Clinton anything, even though he asked. Maybe because he asked that they wouldn't tell him anything. I don't know. That part's interesting.
Jimmy Carter was a believer, wasn't he? He just died.
The rumors are he broke down crying after the briefing on it. For whatever reason. It'd be interesting to look into.
Was it Reagan who inquired with, must have been the Soviets, what if we could all work together for an alien invasion or something?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I have that wrong.
Trying to get the highlights here. This guy says, what do you know about these? Operation Fishbowl. I don't know what that is. He says nothing. Varginha crash, which was a more famous reported crash in Brazil. He says nothing. Roswell crash, he says, they were accurate on some things. The material could have been internal components or small pieces of the alloy around the craft. The alloys I saw looked different from those pictures. Operation Moondust, he says, rumors only, which I don't know what that is. So can't help. Did you hear anything related to a U.S. secret space program? Gary McKinnon claimed to see files describing off-world personnel and ship names that did not exist. It says, yes, the U.S. wants to be able to leave the solar system with their craft and explore. They were working tongue-in-cheek with the Russians before I left. I'm sure the invasion of Ukraine put a stop to that rather quickly. As they're talking about their reverse engineering, they want to get one of these reverse engineered, so take it out for a spin, see what's out there. Do all nations coordinate their effort studying this Bermuda Triangle factory, or is each doing their own thing? Each of them do their own thing. U.S. is pretty greedy with what it finds. We will usually extract information, but never offer any in return. That sounds about right. Intelligence standpoint. So
Yeah, I could see that.
lends a little more credibility. What is the mining tool China has that China has supposedly reverse engineered? What is that capable of? Hard to explain if you haven't seen it. Basically, it extracts the minerals via light or beam directly out of the rock. It has the ability to fill the rock to some degree. China was able to figure out how it works and make a similar version. The problem with the one they built is it only operates for a few seconds before it runs out of power. They still don't understand element 115. It also exploded one time and they had to remake it. So I don't know how he would know all that. But again, it's interesting. Kind of weird specifics. Got quite the imagination, or telling the truth. Are the made-to-spec craft you described just the metal-looking spheres observed and brought up in the latest hearings? Seems to be lots of orbs, disks, and tic-tacs. Yes, this is exactly why they always look so different. Things like triangles and hard-edged squares don't exist, though. Pill shapes are extremely sought after, and some we think are freighters. That's the one like David Fravor's report saw. That guy, he was on Rogan and Lex Friedman. The 2004 incident was one of the famous Tic Tac sightings. So apparently they've never recovered one of those, according to this guy. This guy says, it's not a huge variety that you'd expect from a made-to-spec craft regarding their shapes. He says, the best analogy I can give you for the variety is think of it like wrapping food in tinfoil on a plate. It's a bad analogy, but you get the idea. Usually they will always be round or oval, sometimes even pill-shaped. The tinfoil fits the intended function of covering everything without squishing it. So it's just like built to what it needs, and then protective wrap is put on it. Do they just not like humans and like the planet? What's to stop them from just culling us all? They could absolutely destroy us if they wanted to. It's kind of scary. They have started launch sequences before that we suspect were tests on what they are dealing with. Oh, how he would know that. My personal view is they have to stay out of our way but keep us from destroying ourselves. I imagine life elsewhere in the universe often destroys itself. But yeah, why? I don't know why they would care about us destroying ourselves. That would almost, if they're here to inhabit it, that would almost take their work away. If they just let us destroy ourselves, and they just come a lot less people to deal with. Do you think we will get more answers from the government disclosure, as in them telling us aliens exist, or will the cover-up continue? At one point, they briefed us about opening up information about the craft, but not the construction unit. Nothing happened for months. New leadership shows up suddenly. It's back to bullshit and secrets again. So frickin' new leadership and management doesn't jive in. As to the Air Force, they must have had images and video of these things pretty close up. You'd think they would be the agency with the most knowledge of the subject. He says, the Air Force goal is to fight other countries. They have footage, but is mostly discovered and recorded by sheer chance. The Space Force, however, will be an entirely new thing. Their focus is similar to ours with a sprinkle of disinformation. Regarding materials, do we produce it, or is it collected from other craft and just recycled? Because that seems to be the case, I think, in trying to engineer these things. We tried to produce it and failed. We we produce a shitty variant of it and use it for certain parts we build. Most of what we use for things that cannot be replaced is recycled. Our ability to rehash what they have has gotten better slowly. Is there tech that was gained from these craft that the military widely uses today, or civilians for that matter? He says a lot of your stealth aircraft sport smoother designs for one. Learning to track them also helped with targeting software. Laser technology comes to mind since it's a crippled version of what they use. Most of what I saw was way above us. It's hard to put the hammers and how you see through them into words. It's not like a drone camera, and it's not a clear image, to us at least. Can you clarify? They have a distinct fascination with radiation. Remember how I mentioned they don't go far from home base? When Fukushima happened, the construction facility deployed multiple UFOs to the location over multiple weeks. They were also very interested in Ebola at one point. We can't confirm abductions since the local population is, you get the idea, no one cared. Was that African thing? Ebola?
I
Is that
think
what he's
so.
saying? No one cares about
Or is it
Africa.
Zika? I think it was
Probably Ebola.
10 years ago.
According to Lou Elizondo, he was kind of one of those David Grush type guys, like a guy who was government and then suddenly came out as a supposed whistleblower with a lot of information. But this guy says, according to Elizondo, Italians seem to have a good grasp on the phenomenon, including that they originate somewhere from the Mediterranean. Is it possible there's another factory there? He says, starting this thread and seeing everyone mention the Arctic has me wondering if there were others. It would make sense with other sightings, since as mentioned previously, far from home is rare. So that's another one where, like, why wouldn't he have known that? Like, why are these commenters influencing what he knows in any way? It seems like he would know so much more than anyone else could possibly know. But does the moon hold anything of interest? No, not that I'm aware of. We know that UFOs entering and exiting the atmosphere do not go towards any known planet often. Do you think that they interfere with our general science or investigations? He says, yes, they do not want to be studied. They also do not collect down craft or occupants, it seems to be an oh well approach. Element 115 is the exception. They don't seem to enjoy the idea of us toying with it. Is the technology they reproduce increasing rapidly or lags for years? I wouldn't say it's an increase in technology. It's more like adjustments, better understanding of how to operate. It's one reason we thought about 100 years for the first deployment of the construction facility. If it were here for years, we would have seen the majority of all adjustments made. So I guess that's what the question I asked earlier. So that's why he's saying they were piloted and now they're not, because it's just so recent that they've had to learn how they're doing better on the fly. Does the construction facility produce any signature? Heat, electromagnetic, how do you track it? It says both. We rely mostly on detecting the gravity it produces. It normally doesn't produce heat outright. When it does, we believe it's in the process of construction, since a small heat buildup can be detected when a craft returns or exits. We think this happens when it's being broken back down into parts or assembled. We can only detect these heat signatures when it's near the surface of the ocean, so sometimes a UFO will pop out on us. How do you know about other countries' efforts? We don't obtain that directly, it's passed along to us. My guess would be the typical way we get anything such as spying or bribery. My department sits above the Air Force for UFO recovery and information in the same way the U.S. Air Force sits above me on military plans for Ukraine. Alternatively, do other countries know about U.S. efforts? Russia and China, yes. Others, it depends on the level of information. Some governments still don't know aliens even exist or aren't sure. How do we know you aren't some FBI agent or other glowy? There's no way for me to prove that to you. You should always be asking, though. All I can say is pay attention to things as time progresses, and you'll be able to look back and see I was right. So again, he says, just whatever, believe me or not, but you're going to be coming back to this. So the symbols that you saw, did they remind you of any other symbols you've seen on Earth? No, just what I mentioned. How many craft do we have at the moment? I don't know. I can tell you I've seen about 18 different models pass through for testing and research. He described some of the other tools found on wrecked craft. We have found things as simple as basic tools akin to tweezers to the lab. One that sticks out to me was an oval-shaped silver ball that would change colors based on how close it was to a source of energy. Another would be a sheet of metal that allowed you to view bones by placing it near someone's hand. So that would be cool, just like a instant X-ray
Yeah.
type thing. Can you describe any injuries or deaths that occurred involving an alien craft? I've witnessed no deaths or injuries aside from corpses. I never got to see one. We had one with an abductee, but they weren't sure at the time if she died on impact. Are they going to invade humanity in mass?
Sounds like they have.
Sounds like that you're living it. He says, I think wiping us out would be easy for them currently. No idea why they would wait. So I guess he's saying they don't want to, because if they did, they just would have already. What do you know about element 115? What I described above has its own field of gravity, but is weak on its own. Is it really a stable isotope of the element with atomic number 115? Yes, I'm no expert in that field, though we are given the basics. How would you go about interacting with it? You can hold it. Removal is done very gently, though. Where is it found in the craft? Compartment near the gravity engine, usually not far from the center of the craft. If the craft has a frame with a centerpiece, we have to extract it from an angle. This guy says, fake. How can element be anti-grav? It would fly to space and you couldn't find it. So he says, maybe my explanation was bad, but I feel like it's just your reading comprehension.
Yeah, he has a point.
I could see.
He's not bound by the laws of gravity. It just flies out.
Fake. Which, it's just a funny response.
It's hilarious.
Fake. Yeah, he says, it emits a weak field of gravity. It doesn't float away or hover. If Earth is round, how's come the people on the bottom don't fall off? Yeah. Okay. Why would they allow you to investigate them? He says, I think they just cut their losses. We don't get much opportunity otherwise. They just don't care about the crashes. Couldn't it be on purpose to see how much you can discover? He says, just looking at the way they operate, I doubt it. And isn't it dangerous that the Chinese have this tech? The U.S. is quite upset over it. They won't trade either because they know we will trade in bad faith, so they aren't exactly wrong. So he says China is pretty advanced on engineering this stuff, and they won't key us into it because they know we wouldn't share our stuff with them. Are all models powered by element 115? Every model I've seen operates this way. I've always wanted to see inside the construction unit for this reason alone. What about the Zimbabwe incident where a craft with Greys landed in Rua, Zimbabwe? That's the one, famous one, where it landed in a school, like elementary school yard. Tons of reports on that. It's way too much to get into. He says, it doesn't seem likely, but here's the kicker. Based on what they described, I believe them minus a few things they said. Out of curiosity, do you know any direct contact of agents by them? Never heard of direct contact started from their end. That doesn't mean we haven't. I'll never understand this. The current implementation of compartmentalization and complete secrecy is a fool's errand. He says, one of the minor reasons I'm here, we agree. I do think the initial panic would be really bad, especially for religious community. That's kind of something or just panic in general. People always say, well, they can't just come out and say everything they know because it would cause mass panic, which I guess depending on what they know, maybe. I don't think it'd be like mass panic. I mean,
People would say,
cool.
Cool.
I mean, the Pentagon's already disclosed some things, whether you just think that's some disinformation agenda or whatever, but people are going to think that if they just come out and say whatever, like, what's their angle? Why are they making this up? Or, so yeah, I don't know. Okay, here's some bigger text. You are making stuff up. He just says, okay. If that's what you think. You've mentioned that they get upset at the mention of war and conflict. He says, extremely upset if the threat is believable, like war with countries, etc. Okay, question. Allegedly, certain Army personnel who had close encounters with UAPs would have sudden shifts in emotion or would complain of headaches. A few of these people died shortly after coming into contact. When examined, doctors would find evidence of radiation targeting specific areas of the brain. Gary Nolan thinks this is what Havana syndrome actually was.
It says Havana syndrome is also known as, this is from the AI overview, anomalous health incidents is a rare and disputed medical condition that causes mysterious symptoms in U.S. government officials and their families.
What? There you go.
Okay.
Could be. Question. I've seen a few true believers theorize that if aliens understood human physiology far better than we do, they could influence the brain with some sort of technology we don't really understand. Of course, this would have far-reaching implications about the human brain, mind control, etc. He says, I can't speak to that area much. As I said previously, the tools aren't friendly ones. They would serve a better purpose. Okay. They would serve a better purpose wrangling tards than ensuring a patient is content. So you have to remember some of this. I think it's coming up soon. Remember some of the vocabulary this guy's used. I have something I noticed I'll talk about here. I have had a white orb physically interact with me once. He says nothing comes to mind for that other than the hammers. You can't relay voice or thoughts through them, so I'm not sure. He's kind of calling BS on that guy's white orb, or saying it's not what he's studied at least. Question. Twice I've seen UFOs within hours of experiencing world-shattering catastrophic trauma. Are the two related, or is this just a massive coincidence? He just says they have regulars for abduction. We never observed any repeated stops related to that, though. Has there been any discussion internally about the origins of these beings and the facility? He says, only amongst ourselves, since we see the direction they interleave the solar system briefly. The higher-ups definitely know it, just wasn't part of what we did. Once it leaves the planet, ignore it. I'm guessing that the biology department has little to no communication with yours. He says, I wouldn't know they exist if I didn't see them. We get a basic rundown the higher-ups give us. If we send information forward, it is always passed along. Any idea what happens to the ships, planes, people that construction unit disappears? Yeah, you already answered that. Destroyed near instantly with no suffering. So that's good. Doesn't torture him. Can you try to draw some symbols for us? Putting him to the test. I can't remember anything specific, if I'm being honest. It all looks the same to me. Kind of racist. Does the language look linear like ours? Yes, but there are soft corners and things like dots, but not many. I guess there's some specifics for it. What about space-time manipulation? Any hunches there? Never heard any ideas pitched other than the engineer's gravity causing time dilation. This guy says, you're contradicting actual data we have on UAPs and also acting like you have access to all compartmentalized departments of DIA. He says, if it provides any context, I knew a lot less until I managed the team the last few years. You should be skeptical. Then he hops off for a bit. So I think that's the first time he mentioned that he actually managing the team at some point. So that was interesting. Now, this guy was responding to that other guy. He says, what are you talking about? What actual data do we have on UAP? And then this guy says, I'm not surprised some people think this way. There's a ton of shrouded information on the topic. Says, I think debunkers are necessary, though. They aren't wrong. This community should be skeptical. If the U.S. Navy, etc., knows where the construction facility is, it's just what he highlighted. He says they don't. They don't know. The Navy does. This guy says a lot of Bob Lazar is proven BS. He asks for a source on it. Yeah, that was interesting because he's not... Lazar isn't like this really heralded guy by most people within the UFO. You know, it's not... There's a lot of debate and distrust of him. So I guess it's also weird if he was if he just knows all this, why he would choose Lazar to back up with these claims, although I don't know who else you'd choose. But it seems like, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Like if he is just making it up based on everything he knows, if he knew that much about UFOs, you would think he would know that a lot of people don't trust Lazar and wouldn't mention him.
Yeah, that's why I think it's just Bob.
Yeah, it's just him, yeah. I haven't heard that. Might be onto something. What does the interior of the craft look like? Please
Like
describe
those
it in
NBA
detail.
players that that get burner accounts on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, it's just so obvious. Number 32 isn't getting the ball enough.
Yeah.
Man, he'd go off. Just needs time to show everyone what he can do.
I would buy out the entire arena myself if we could have a game where only 32 shot the ball.
Or remember that Patrick Reed's wife had the burner account?
Oh, no.
Would like always post stuff defending Patrick Reed, which was especially obvious because who would defend Patrick Reed?
Yeah.
A lot of Bob Lazar's proven bullshit. No, it's not. He's actually a really cool guy, from what I've heard.
From what I've heard.
Okay, what does the interior of the craft look like? Please describe in detail. He says, it's always cramped and hard to stand fully upright in. For reference, I'm 5'8". That's probably
How
not...
tall's Bob?
That's probably... I mean, if there's any truth to this, if he's actually whistleblowing, I'm sure he wouldn't use his own height. So this could be something... Yeah, I'm sure he's not actually 5'8", if he's telling the truth. There's almost never a storage facility in the craft unless it's dedicated to something for the craft. There's always a method of interacting with the craft. Tools are not freely placed around the craft and have dedicated placement.
Just a crescent wrench laying on the ground somewhere.
Yes, just a scattering tools.
Random screwdriver.
Just not organized. Never know what we're going to need down there. Just take it all. Comment, it sounds like the Tic Tacs or cigar-shaped ones are transports nobody has gotten a hold of, right? Cigar-shaped are very rare. Correct, we were told finding one would be career-changing. We suspect they are transports, but ultimately don't know. Some kind of reward system, if you can be the one to... Or I don't know what he means, career... Who is finding these? Like, does that imply, like, someone in his position, like, he can find them and then...
Well, that's what it seems like.
Rewarded for... So, I don't know how that would... Or, like, career-changing for your unit. Like, if your unit find one within, for your division within the broader program or something. So that's somewhat odd comment to make.
Yeah, I don't know where they find them because they're all retrieved from crashes.
I don't think anyone ever asked that because I don't remember. I mean, we're almost through it now. They asked who tips them off? But that would be one of the main questions I would think. What role do you think Space Force will play in disclosure moving forward? It says, openly stated to us discovery for internal use and disinformation to the public, which I don't even know what Space Force claims its purpose is. But what can we do as a populace to encourage your bosses to lighten up? He says, this has always been on my mind. I think if we convinced another nation like China or Russia to come out, the U.S. would have to come out as well. I think having the Air Force release their footage was a way to jumpstart SpaceX in a way. The Pentagon has already reported that the legit UAPs are off-world vehicles not made on this Earth, while you're claiming they are made in a facility in the Earth. He says, I stayed multiple times. We've seen them come and go from the planet. We suspect the construction facility is capable of space travel as well. The facility itself can
is a craft
travel too. I guess. Why couldn't it if it can do all this other stuff? That seemed trivial. Comment, people with security clearances that large don't just get on 4chan to spill the beans. He says, you're not wrong, and if it makes you feel better, watching my internet take a shit last night made me panic a bit. Like his internet went out or something. He says, made him panic a bit, if I'm being honest. I could have just ignored your post too.
I like the expression, if I'm being honest.
If I'm being
He's
honest.
used that a number of times.
Yeah, honestly.
Telling on himself a bit.
Comment, providing zero evidence towards his claim. Also, the burden of proof fallacy. He says, was I supposed to steal data from work and post it freely here? How about a copy of my clearance or work badge? Yes, Anon, let me just out myself completely. So he's saying, tell you all that stuff. Any info about the crop circles? That's a whole different subject. It says, never seen one or heard of it being relevant. Has there been any unusual effects on the environment, wildlife? No, but they do study animals. The guy says, why was 2002 a big year? So this was an interesting answer because he says, a lot of activities and changes in operation, both for them and us. A lot of secrecy issues surfaced that year as a result. Funding also jumped through the roof. So I kind of take this as he's saying, that sounds like he was working there in 2002 because he says we and whatever, how he describes that. And then I guess maybe I didn't mention it earlier, but in one of these answers, he talks about how they recruit, and he says like you have to have a really clear background and whatever. And he says he's never seen anyone under 35. So if you take that, and if he was working there in 2002 and was at least 35 then, and probably 40 at least, if he's never seen anyone. So that would mean he's like 60, in his 60s now. And from a lot of the way he's wording things and stuff, and I guess just being on 4chan in general, it doesn't seem like something someone in their 60s would do the way he's talking.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen that mentioned anywhere in overviews or critiques of this. And he could just be talking, whatever. He could just say we, like talking about the department before he was there. If he's talking about 2002, but that was just one interesting thing that stood out. Because it sounds like he's saying. And if, how would he know? If it's so secret, then how would he know? If he wasn't there, would he know it was such a big year?
Yeah. No, that sounds like he was working.
So
I feel like that guy who he's in the CIA or whatever, who always comes on Rogan and he refers to it as the agency.
Mike Baker.
Yeah, his kids are Sluggo and
Slug.
Rocky and Sluggo or something
Rocky
like that.
Sluggo. Yeah.
The agency.
Never leave the CIA. Call them ex-CIA, but
yeah,
that's no such thing. Okay, I think basically in the last few here. Is this job stressful? Very. Strained my marriage greatly. What kind of training qualifications are needed to work in this field? Record needs to be clean as possible. Education can vary. Do you listen to public sightings or go off your own agency's intel? It says agency intel all the way. Nearly all of it is passed verbally in person. How does the government prevent or respond to potential national security threats posed by UFOs coming, going, in, out of the atmosphere or ocean? He says wait for crashes. The only time everyone is all hands on deck is if they screw with nukes. We mostly just watch and wait for them to fuck up. So I guess there he says we mostly watch. So maybe they do have, I don't know. If he's saying they have some sort of monitoring device that can detect the crashes or what. This guy says, if you're dying, why can't you just tell us the department name and share some photos of documents? He says, I'd like to appreciate what little life I have left. So I guess he thinks that would cause him trouble. Do you know where in space they come from? Any star system in particular? Again, higher-ups knew. I never did. He's gone to that quite a few times. An answer for something he doesn't want to. I don't know why that would be that secret, if someone knows, but he wouldn't. He just never asked.
Well, might have got him in trouble.
Yeah, it's career suicide. Any craft found on Earth that was ancient? He says, none that I saw. Comment, plasma physics has developed greatly in the past few decades. He says, you should be paying attention to things like this long after I leave. Laser technology too. And that's it. I went over most of them. He says, taking a break until later this evening. As I mentioned, weekend is busy. If the thread dies, I'll attempt to do another. And he actually did do, I don't know, I think this is the same guy, but I'm not going to go into all that. I think we covered plenty of it. But there are some posts from a couple weeks later that might be the same guy, but it's a lot of the same stuff. So Yeah, I don't know. Guy with a got a creative guy on our hands, or a very important guy on our hands.
Yeah, my takeaway with these is that I don't understand how they couldn't trace. I mean, it seems like they can do so much stuff. Like if he was really
Yeah.
what he was saying was really a threat,
Yeah.
I don't
If
know
he's
why
really
they'd allow
just
that.
spilling all this truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be there's different options. If it's just whatever, just a completely made up normal guy who's really into the topic, wanting to have fun, that's an option. It could be a guy in a similar role to what he's describing, but this is all, like I said, with some other things, possibly a lot of truth in it, but also just things thrown in to completely throw off the story, It could be that. I don't know how likely. I mean, obviously, probably the most likely, whatever, making it up or writing. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll wait and see. Keep coming back to it as more stuff emerges.
Yeah. And the other thing I don't understand, and we touched on it a little bit, was what they're doing to prevent any sort of nuclear. Because I've heard that before, but I haven't really quite understood. Like, just because you're going to fly your craft above, and so is the goal. What is their goal? Like, somebody will see it and be like, oh, there's aliens.
I mean,
maybe we
there is
shouldn't
multiple
ourselves
reports of
up.
them disabling the nukes. So I guess I look into that more to know exactly what to mention. But yeah, I don't know. Some like just general intimidation, like we can shut these down, we're here, whatever. But
So, like, the people who, I guess it's the people in the know who are like, these things keep flying above our stuff, and they've proven that they can do
but
that.
you don't
It's
want
not
to,
even,
want to tell Russia that they're shutting your stuff down. I don't know.
yeah. Well, presumably they would be doing the same thing over Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
You'd think, and then they wouldn't want to tell us either. Yeah.
Right.
I can't figure, I don't know a reason that military people would make up those reports. So all that stuff's interesting. Like what?
Yeah.
A lot of it seems credible. Just don't know how to categorize it or understand it yet.
Also, it seems like too, if they care about us, I don't know. I mean, I guess if they just have an interest in us and want us to be a lot, like, not blow the planet up or blow ourselves up, that's one thing. But if then he was mentioning abductions
Studying.
and some of the stuff, like the psychosis and things that they'll induce on people. So if they were real compassionate about the human race, I wouldn't think they would be doing that. I mean, maybe outside of just studying somebody, but they could do that, I would think, and induce that childlike behavior or whatever he was mentioning.
Yeah, it was purposefully induced or some side of something. There's all kinds of
I guess that
cattle
could be
mutilation reports. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, I
That's
was
one of the
gonna, because you
weird
said that
parts
they
of-
studied.
Well, whatever is doing this to the cattle, like all the blood's gone. There's no blood under the animal. Like the blood was taken somewhere else, and then the animal was placed there. They say like scavengers always stay away from these cattle, where normally a dead cow would be decimated, eaten to the bone. It's like weird, like skin around the mouth is like removed. The genitals are removed, like all with precision, accuracy. Yeah, I don't know. It's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Can't get into all.
Yeah,
of
I haven't really looked into that.
one thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah, I don't know. My gut would be that I don't know. It seems like it would where it's just somebody having fun with it online. I just don't think. Well, like you said, I guess if you piece together his age and then some of the way he was wording stuff, nothing he said sounded like he would be somebody high up in this managing people in a
And he only
secret
mentioned
government
he was the
association.
manager after someone. How would you know all of this? And he's like, well, actually, I managed the team my last few years, so I didn't know until then. Yeah, I think there's enough kind of examples that don't quite. Yeah, I think you can pretty confidently say it's not what he claims it is. Whether he's in some similar position, and I don't know. It's just makes you think.
It's fun. It's fun to
You kinda
think about there being a spaceship manufacturing thing.
Even if
under
it is
the ocean.
made up, he kind of summarized in a way a lot of like what is out there, or all the lore that's currently out there, which you would want to do if you don't want, you can't go make up something that is going to contradict everything that's out there, because people be like, well, there's all these reports that don't mention, there's no reports of what you're describing. They all describe this other thing to believe in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really get, like, the people who say, oh, like, why does no one care about what's going on, or like what, like, I don't know. I don't think people should care about it. Like, you can't do anything about it. It's hard to filter what's going on. It's like, it doesn't affect anything really. It's like, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just the thing. There's so much stuff out there, and some of it's like, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's fun to talk about, but yeah, I don't spend all day researching it.
Somehow being confirmed officially, I don't think really changes. It's just like a new thing. Like,
unlike you said, people will be skeptical of it.
Whatever. We adapt to whatever info we're presented with. It just becomes normalized right away. Yeah. It's like,
it would be similar to, like, if you were born and we had no knowledge that we were in a solar system, there's other planets, and then one day you wake up and they're like, hey, we found some of these other planets are rotating around, whatever. It's like, oh wow, that completely changes the way I thought things work, but whatever. So versus now we don't even think about it, because that's just how it was. But poor analogy, but
so I would, just a new thing. Just get used to it.
New thing, yeah.